I don't know. I'm again a problem of observing these things partly through the lens of lobby correspondents who mostly work for newspapers and that are desperately and eternally dedicated to opposing anything that's not Tory or even further right than Tory. You kind of don't know about the scale of the problem. But 50 people signing a letter complaining about it is 50 people signing a letter complaining about it. It's not like 1922 committee letters of dissatisfaction. It's not up there with a sort of constant aura of threat that hung around Boris Johnson's final months or Liz Truss's entire premiership. So it's my job, isn't it, to cut through that and try and provide you with clearer analysis. But I can't. I can't without you. All I can tell you is that they seem quite desperate to get rid of Starmer. And if you think back to his predecessor, I never met a Tory. I never met a Tory who wanted Jeremy Corbyn to be replaced as leader of the Labour Party, even after he did much better than was expected in that election called by Theresa May, because Labour somehow, despite being led by a Leaver, became the last repository for hopes that Brexit might be reversed. I never met a Tory that wanted Jeremy Corbyn to be replaced. So the fact that the Tories really want Starmer to be replaced, the Tory press really want him to be replaced, might be significant, it might not, because whoever replaces him, they'll probably move on to character assassination of them as well. Corbyn's something of an exception in that rule. Mark in Lim made this point before I just shared with you my analysis of how the right wing are currently reacting to Keir Starmer, so I give him the credit. I hadn't seen this, but it came in at 10:20, so I should have done. There is one alarm bell ringing for me, he writes. Or maybe I had read it and I hadn't actually clocked it. I just subconsciously absorbed by a process of intellectual osmosis the point being made. All the Tories reform are trying to get rid of Starmer, so Mr. and Mrs. Wrong from Wrongsville are suggesting that Starmer should resign or be replaced. Just think about that for a minute. Yeah, I mean, you're right, but one of my favourite commentators from the left, Polly Toynbee, is also suggesting that Keir Starmer's days are numbered, Mark. And I don't think, well, you could describe her as Mrs. Wrong from Wrongsville if you want, but you certainly can't describe her as Tory or reform adjacent. 10:37 is the time. And, we're reading out messages that I should have read out earlier. This from Stu. I'm a big fan. That's a good way to start a message. I'm a big fan, but. That works, like I love you, but. So that's if you want to get something negative read out, just preface it with the words I love you, but, or I'm a big fan, but. Only James could say, let's jump right into the calls after doing a 20-minute monologue. Well, you say that, Stu. I think I could make a case for arguing that was quite an early point at which to get into the calls, so my original suggestion stands. Carl is in Liverpool, which is, of course, Andy Burnham's home turf, but no longer politically. Carl, what would you like to say?
I think this is the only possible outcome that we could have seen, James. Yeah. I think Starmer is thinking not only for his own kind of political survival, but more importantly for the stability of the government. And I think if Burnham would have got in, it would have just opened the floodgates not only for loads of speculation and another election campaign around the mayoralty, but then also for every single twist and turn, every ups and all the downs and the pitfalls that Starmer would be seeing for the rest of his term. There would be that sniping, there would be the media speculation of, is Burnham going to go and try and unseat him? And I think there would be a temptation. Well, I think Burnham, by actually the way that he's applied to do this as well, he sought permission from the NEC instead of going to Starmer first. I think Burnham's laid his cards out there and made it clear that if he does go in, he is going in to basically try and unseat Starmer.
And that's probably a little bit of what's the word I want? Not petulance. What's the word for being a little bit previous? Oh, previous will do. It's probably a little bit previous of Andy Burnham to have become so entirely associated with the leadership challenge.
I think so, but then, I think you see that in his response as well, whether he gave out about, the response that the NEC had made not to block him. But I think the other thing to say is there needs to come a point, but I don't think it's now, when Starmer thinks what is best for the country. Now, presuming he thinks Labour is best for the country, yes, he needs to look at who is best for Labour, and the polling are saying it isn't him and it is Burnham. So, you get into some sort of thing where they make a deal or whatever, but I think to bring in Burnham at this stage would have just been too problematic for the rest of Keir Starmer's term.
And that's presuming he wins. Because, of course, if he loses the by-election...
Exactly. And that's the other thing. You mentioned that at the top, didn't you? The internal polling is saying that they might not even win it, which is another good reason for Starmer not to have allowed them to go through with it.
I've tried to write down the various permutations that could happen, but it's probably going to be as successful yesterday as my attempt to describe the difference between a rock and a hard place and ending up having to introduce a cliff face and a brick wall because there were so many different paths that things could go down. But you've got lose-lose, which is Burnham runs for Parliament and frees up the mayoralty, and they lose both of the resulting elections. You've got lose keep, which is now on the table, which is that they lose the by-election, but Burnham doesn't fight it, so they keep the mayoralty. And then you've got win keep, which is Burnham doesn't run. Whoever does run, Jonathan Ashworth or an other, they somehow win a by-election against all the odds, and of course they hang on to the mayoralty. Or you've got win-win, which would involve Burnham winning, and then another candidate running for mayor and winning as well. And I think most people would probably put that fourth option in fourth place in terms of likelihood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think, and like I say, I think the problem with that is as well, there's so much risk in it, but then there's the noise around it, and you're going to have all of the media kind of, unpicking the different results of it. I just think it's too messy, and it's the expense of it as well.
I don't know that gets taken into many individual voters' calculus, but I'll tell you what you've done, Carl, and all the callers today have done. It answered the question I was asking earlier. It's a little bit stupid of me, really, not to realise. How do you cut through the fact that almost all of the coverage, certainly the print coverage in this country, has to be viewed through the lens of a hideously biased media ownership? The owner of the Daily Mail, the owner of the Times, the owner of the Sun. In fact, they're all edited now by former protégés or apprentices to Paul Dacre, the maddest man in Madsville. Currently a little bit preoccupied, of course, at the High Court. But the nature of print media in this country is so utterly bent that you can sit here wondering how you cut through it when the answer's staring us in the face. You just set the facts out correctly and open up your phone lines. So far, quite good listening for Keir Starmer. Albeit that there aren't exactly any cheerleaders on the line. In terms of pragmatism and utilitarianism, he kind of had to do this. And although I'm not part of this, there is a sort of sense in my inbox of people who still think he can turn the oil tanker around. Adam is in Haverhill. Haverhill. What would you like to say, Adam?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I agree with your previous callers. I think Keir Starmer made exactly the right decision. The whole thing was a kind of lose-lose, really, for Starmer. But I think
that was option one. That's option one.
He took the win that was there, and I think it was absolutely the right decision to make.
Simply because of all the calculations that we've been running through. Of all the options that could happen, but when you combine likelihood and desirability, there's a trade-off, isn't there, between likelihood and desirability. You don't put all your money on what you want to happen. You split your bet according to what is likely to happen, and this way, the worst-case scenario is that they lose a by-election and hang on to the mayoralty, which closes down the worst-case scenario, which is they lose a by-election and lose the mayoralty.
Absolutely.
What about the cowardice angle? I'm going to quote Polly Toynbee, who I am a big fan of. She's one of my favourite writers and indeed one of my favourite thinkers. Declaring war on Andy Burnham, anoints him as a northern martyr and hero and casts Keir Starmer as a coward.
I don't agree with that analysis.
No, I don't think I do anymore. I did at 10 o'clock. This is what happens. This is what happens when you listen to other people. No wonder so few people do it.
Exactly. We should never listen to anyone.
You should never listen to anybody. Pick your opinions and stick to them. And if you don't like them, I've got others. Because of the way that we've broken it down, and also because of the character that Starmer seems to be, cowardice probably wouldn't come into the calculations.
No, I think Starmer is completely pragmatic. My concerns are that the advice he gets from his current chief of staff is taking him down routes that maybe the government should not be going down. But as to Starmer himself, I've heard him described as a non-idealist in the sense that he's someone that will look at a problem and try to solve it, rather than coming to it with any ideological baggage. And that's something I completely subscribe to. But I mean, I think sometimes people do bang on about Labour comms, and I do think it's not really worked so far, and they just need to find, they need to find an answer to that particularly sort of knotty equation. So that they can actually communicate properly, or not properly, but more effectively with the people of the country. So that they do try, but to a certain extent. But the problem is that overwhelmingly the media are acting as the official opposition, as Tom Baldwin put it.
Yeah, but they always will. I mean, it doesn't matter who's in charge of Labour. Tony Blair somehow managed to walk that tightrope but he ended up godfather to one of Rupert Murdoch's children. So there are some.
Did he really?
Yes, he really did. I'm beginning to think you haven't read my last book, Adam. But there are some paths that you wouldn't necessarily want any politician to go down, let alone an ostensibly left-wing one. It is 10:45. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A quick one from Tom, actually, because this is quite thoughtful as well. Manchester resident for over 20 years, married to a Mancunian, kids are Mancunian. Doesn't that make you a Mancunian, Tom? We don't want to go all Suella Braverman, who of course doesn't think she or her kids can be English, despite being English. Only Sir Keir is actually thinking about Manchester. Manchester has been left out of this conversation. Andy Burnham does now need to go, but in a managed transition for an equally experienced and competent Labour candidate. For example, Rayner or Reynolds, I think you mean Starmer at that point, Nandi, Powell, etc. Manchester cannot be left in the lurch just because we're economically successful and a few MPs want a leadership change in London. Manchester has been left out of the conversation. That is the point I was trying to make earlier when I said I think we're under pricing because a lot of coverage is coming out of Westminster. What you'd feel like as a Labour voter in Manchester who got the mayor you wanted, who described it as the dream job, the job of his life, the only job he'd ever wanted. Joe's in Colchester. Joe, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. How are you? All right?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
Good. I just want to say I think that Starmer's made the worst decision he could make. It is very much a catch-22 situation for him. There's no good outcome from Burnham applying, but to block him was the wrong decision in the interests of both democracy, the Labour Party, and his own interests.
Go on, tell me more.
Okay, so first of all, democracy.
Let's start with democracy. He just got elected as mayor of Manchester, and the people that voted for him will be told, "Sorry, doesn't matter what you voted for 2 years ago. You're going to have to choose another one now." So, I mean, there's an argument both against and in favour of democracy being undermined. So no voters yet. Local
constituents. Yeah, but it's up to the local constituent to decide on its candidate. So if the local constituency decide they want Andy Burnham as the candidate, there will be another mayoral election, which will give people the chance to demonstrate their...
Again, the Labour Party constitution...
Demonstrate their vote.
The Labour Party constitution states that they need to be approved by the NEC. It's not like they've invented a rule to keep Burnham out.
No,
and that was, of course, that was a vote.
I don't believe in that constitution, and so did Starmer said a few years ago he didn't believe that the NEC should be blocking candidates and that they should be decided by the local party, by the local constituency.
And that hurts him now.
So that's who should decide the candidate.
Okay, I quite like this. I'm struck that this is the political equivalent of football, because you're in Essex. With a passionate support for a Mancunian mayor.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah,
God for that. I thought you hadn't got the joke. And you're a big Burnham fan, I think.
I think, yes, I am.
Okay.
100%. Yeah, I think Andy Burnham would make a great Prime Minister. My hope that when Keir Starmer came in is that this would happen. I supported Starmer at the beginning until he rolled back on everything that he promised the members. And on the run-up to the election about a year before, you could see that he was not the candidate that was going to bring about change in this country. But, that aside, I think for Starmer's own interests and for the interests of the Labour Party, he's made an absolute blunder of a decision. If he was to let Burnham run, it's been noted that Burnham might not win. So let's have a look at that situation. If Burnham didn't win, his problems are over. There's no leadership contest coming. Burnham's finished.
Yeah, but it's a disaster for the Labour Party, though. It's an appalling party. I mean, I don't. I'm glad you've rung in, because I think it's important that these points get aired, and some of them might actually undo some of the points that have been aired previously. But that would be a disaster. They arguably could have then neither the mayoralty nor the constituency. And Keir Starmer's job is to manage the Labour Party as well as to run the government. And that no manager on the planet would claim that losing the league and the cup was actually the right thing to have deliberately put yourself in a position to do.
No, but who would take the flak if that was to happen?
Starmer.
Let's be realistic.
Starmer would.
I don't think he would.
Come off it. He'd take it from the right-wing media. No, he'd take it from you, Joe, let's be honest, and he'd take it from all of the media as well. And he'd probably take it from the Parliamentary Labour Party.
Burnham stand. I think that Burnham would be the one that would come out. His leadership challenge would be over. Yeah, look, if they lost the mayoral and the thing, and he immediately accepted Burnham in without any hesitation, maybe there would be some spin on it, some spin on him, some bad press on him. But I think that Burnham would come out worse off if he was to lose that election.
Everybody loses.
The likelihood, from my opinion, is Burnham will win that hands down. If he doesn't run, they will lose it.
Okay, that's a win for you. That's a win for you, because that's never going to be tested. So you can be, you can have that. No one can ever take that away from you. You can be certain that Burnham would have won, and you might be right, but you haven't persuaded me. We will agree to disagree on this. In the calculations I've undertaken, I was closer to where you are now at 10 o'clock this morning than I am now. But the calculations you've undertaken do two things. I think they over-egg Burnham's electoral appeal, both in the constituency and in the broader country, and they undervalue some of the things that Starmer and his team have said. Most obviously resources, whether that's money or people, need to be focused on the elections that we must have, not elections that we don't have to have. And so, sorry, go on.
This by-election, we must have this by-election.
Yeah, but we don't need to have a mayoral election,
the best
mate.
Candidate. But we know
which is much bigger.
Is going to be a challenge. Yeah, but we know the seat is going to be a challenge, and therefore we need the best candidate to run it. And let's be honest, the new mayoral candidate would be fully supported by Andy Burnham, would be somebody that would be designed to continue the project that Andy Burnham has started, and abandoned. I believe would have a very, very strong chance of retaining that seat with Burnham's full support. Burnham would give his absolute full support to that candidate, and would basically, that candidate would be running on the basis that they will continue everything that Burnham's already, the great work that Burnham's been doing in Manchester.
You're right. All of the counterfactuals are on your side, because someone else can ring in and say, "Don't be ridiculous. There's not a hope in hell," and you could say, "I'm confident that I'm right," and no one can ever prove it otherwise. But in terms of working out what is likely to happen, or what is possible, as opposed to what you wish for or what you think is probable, shutting down lose-lose, for most people, seems like a bigger priority than rolling the dice on the possibility of win-win. And what you've got instead is worst-case scenario, lose-keep, best-case scenario, win-keep. Under your analysis, you've got worst-case scenario, lose-lose. And that's off the table entirely. So that's the pragmatic course to take. If you remove the personalities from it, and don't allow yourself to be swayed by the question of whether you want Keir Starmer to be replaced, I don't see how you can overcome that utilitarian argument. You've taken lose-lose off the table. You've left win-win on it, but you've increased the likelihood of lose-win, or at least lose-keep. 10:59 is the time. Should I squeeze in Alan in Sheffield, or shall we hit the news on time for once? Alan, I'll give you 1 minute. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is it was a very difficult decision, and I'm not sure he could have won whatever he did.
Well, there's no good outcome. It's all bad. No, it's gradations of badness.
But the reality is, I canvass on the ground in Sheffield quite a lot,
right.
And Labour are very, very unpopular at the moment. And what would have happened, and if you look at the latest opinion polls for the Greater Manchester, Labour are down by 12 points in the morality. So what you'd have done, you've had an unnecessary election, you would have lost the by-election to Reform, you would have lost the mayoralty to Reform, you then in May lose places like Birmingham, you lose places like Barnsley, and you're in for a disaster. And Starmer and the people down in London know that. And, it's a situation where they can do very little about, because there is an irrational hatred of Starmer on the doorstep in 4 working-class areas, which has been built up from a whole variety of sources.
What are your favourite sources? What are your favourite sources? This Eleanor and I are fascinated by this. We talk about it quite a lot because it's visceral, this hatred.
Visceral.
And
Absolutely.
you know, I can understand a visceral hatred of a politician whose law enforcement officers are shooting civilians in the face. I can understand a visceral hatred of a politician who lies through his teeth about leaving the European Union or being anti-Semitic in his school days, or whatever that behaviour is. I can understand a visceral reaction to that. How do we account for a visceral reaction to what could be best described as a sort of excessive managerialism?
Well, I taught politics for 30 years at a university, and I can't explain it because people, you know, he's not the worst prime minister we've ever had. He's not the best, but that the hatred comes from a place, you know, which people like Reform are now. It must be
online. I mean, online sort of demonisation.
Yeah.
We had that conversation yesterday about the racist accounts that are just utterly fraudulent. Keir Starmer's been on the receiving end of similar, but it doesn't necessarily. It also casts our fellow citizens in an appalling light.